They say the camera doesn't lie. But in America, even when the camera tells the truth, the system often tries to cover it up. Each year, more than 1,000 documented cases of police misconduct surface across the United States, but the number of officers convicted or even disciplined, that's barely a drop in the bucket. Accountability seems like a myth when the uniform itself becomes a shield against justice. And this time, the system messed with the wrong man. This time, the victim was a black entrepreneur who had built everything with his bare hands. A man who believed in order, who respected law enforcement, and who never imagined that the very people he respected would violate his rights so flagrantly. This story doesn't begin with violence or a traffic stop. It begins with quiet success, community pride, and a vehicle, a custom Jeep Wrangler that became the target of spite, envy, and abuse of power. But what the officers didn't know was that the man they targeted wasn't just another statistic. He was a planner, a fighter, a survivor. And he had cameras. Before we begin today's story, please let us know where you are viewing from. Please remember to subscribe if you like this video. 3 of them. Hidden in plain sight. Watching everything. Capturing a truth that would explode across social media, send ripples through a city, and force a department to answer questions they had buried for far too long. His name is Deshawn Miller. Born and raised in the south side of Atlanta, he came from a place where opportunities were scarce, but ambition ran deep. His father worked nights at a warehouse. His mother cleaned offices. They didn't have much, but they had rules. Work hard. Tell the truth. Don't mess with cops. Respect the hustle. Deshawn absorbed those lessons like gospel. At 17, he worked weekends doing odd jobs, lawn care, grocery delivery, painting fences. By 21, he had saved enough to buy a used Ford pickup and launched his own small-time hauling business. He called it Next Wave Haulage, a nod to the idea that he was building something that would last. Within 10 years, Deshawn turned that truck into a fleet. 10 drivers. 4 box trucks. A warehouse lease. A small team in an office downtown. He was giving jobs to young men who had been turned away everywhere else. Former inmates. High school dropouts. Fathers trying to do right. His name was known in the neighborhood, not just as a boss, but as a builder. But success has a way of drawing both praise and poison. While his employees saw opportunity, others saw arrogance. While kids in the neighborhood saw inspiration, others saw a target. And not all of them were civilians. It started subtly. 2 cop cars parked outside his house for no apparent reason. Then late-night slow drives past his street. Then one morning, he woke up to find his Jeep Wrangler, brand new, fresh from a custom shop, had scratches along the passenger side door. At first, he thought it was random vandalism. He filed a report. Nothing came of it. A week later, his Jeep's gas cap was removed and left dangling. He tightened it. 3 days later, the taillight was shattered. That's when he started to get suspicious. He had no enemies, no beef with anyone. The only thing new was the consistent police presence in his neighborhood. And that Jeep, matte black, lifted with the Next Wave logo wrapped along the side, was hard to miss. He decided to do something. Quietly. No confrontation. Just facts. He installed 3 security cameras. One was under his porch light. One inside a decorative birdhouse in the tree line. The last was inside a solar-powered floodlight near the garage. All of them pointed toward the driveway. He didn't tell anyone, not his employees, not his neighbors. He just waited. On the morning of July 18, 2024, Deshawn checked the footage while sipping coffee. What he saw made his hand tremble. 2 uniformed officers. Badges visible. Flashlights off. One used a key to etch a line into the side of his Jeep. The other kicked the rear bumper twice, then laughed. Then they disappeared into the night. Deshawn couldn't believe it. He replayed the footage 5 times. Every time, it got worse. The laughter. The casual way they walked away. Like it was routine. Like they had done this before. He didn't tell anyone. Not yet. He downloaded the footage, time-stamped it, and made 3 backup copies. One on his laptop. One on a cloud drive. One on a USB key he kept in his wallet. Then he waited. For nights later, they came again. This time, one of them used a baton to tap the rear window. No damage, but an intimidation move. On camera. All of it. That morning, Deshawn filed a formal complaint with the Atlanta Police Department. He attached a still photo, just one frame showing 2 officers near the vehicle. He didn't show the full footage yet. He wanted to see if they'd admit it. Days passed. No reply. 2 weeks later, he sent an email to Internal Affairs with a 30-second clip. Still no response. That's when he realized the department wasn't going to act. They weren't going to protect him. So he went to the people. He contacted a local investigative journalist named Sierra Banks. Known for exposing corruption and shady practices, Sierra agreed to meet in person. When she saw the footage, she gasped. "You realize what this is, right?" she said. "If this goes public, it's going to blow up." Deshawn nodded. "I want it to. But I want to do it right." Within 48 hours, Sierra aired a special segment on Channel 7 News. Black business owner says cops vandalized his vehicle, caught on camera. The clip played. Millions watched. By noon, it was trending on Twitter. By 3 p.m., CNN picked it up. Hashtag spread like wildfire. Hashtag justice for Deshawn. Hashtag protect black success. Hashtag badge or vandal. The community exploded. Supporters rallied outside police headquarters. Young men from his company wore Next Wave shirts and held signs that read "We build. They break." City council members demanded a response. The mayor called for an independent investigation. And finally, after 2 weeks of silence, the department suspended both officers pending review. One tried to claim the footage was doctored. But with 3 angles, multiple timestamps, and backup cloud verification, that lie didn't last long. Public trust in the department plummeted. But the story wasn't over. Because when Sierra dug deeper, she uncovered bodycam footage from those same officers on other nights. Footage that showed them mocking residents, joking about putting them in their place, and laughing about a rich boy in a Wrangler. That rich boy was Deshawn. The department now faced scrutiny from state regulators. The 2 officers resigned before charges could be filed. But the DA kept investigating. And Deshawn? He became a symbol. Not of victimhood, but of resistance, accountability, and the power of watching the watchers. He used his platform to speak at schools, council meetings, and forums on police reform. He partnered with nonprofits to distribute low-cost home security kits to residents in underserved neighborhoods. The message was clear: film everything. Document everything. Truth doesn't protect itself, you have to catch it. And catch it he did. Months passed and Deshawn's impact only deepened, though the resistance evolved too, more subtle now, more veiled behind red tape and bureaucracy, but just as heavy. Zoning board suddenly denied permits for his second warehouse in Birmingham, citing outdated fire codes. Tax audits began, 2 in 1 quarter, while local police claimed noise complaints at his logistics yard without ever producing a single 911 call. Yet he smiled through it. Not out of ignorance, but because he expected it. Success for a black man speaking truth to power came with a cost, and Deshawn had already paid the entry fee the night they keyed his Jeep and spat at his dignity. But he didn't just play defense. He moved smart, surrounded himself with legal minds, former prosecutors turned advocates, digital security experts, and civil engineers. His nonprofit Frame the Truth trained over 200 community members in filming safely, understanding qualified immunity, handling retaliatory arrests, and setting up surveillance that was admissible in court. Teens started filming police traffic stops not out of curiosity, but out of civic duty. Some officers hated it, some changed their tone mid-stop, and a few even thanked the kids. That was the power of accountability. One night, a high school student named Amari sent Deshawn a clip. It showed a cop dragging her cousin from a car, cursing, twisting his arm while backup officers laughed. The footage went viral. Amari's cousin was released, the officer suspended, and Amari received a scholarship from the nonprofit. Deshawn met her family. He saw the same fear in her grandmother's eyes that he saw in his mother when he first told her about the vandalism. Fear that it wasn't just a Jeep they were after, it was his life. But he promised them both. We're not victims, we're witnesses. And witnesses change the world. Meanwhile, city elections loomed. Candidates began parroting Deshawn's phrases: transparency, truth, reform, equity. Some meant it. Most didn't. He endorsed none, but held public forums where every candidate had to answer hard questions in front of cameras and youth panels. He didn't yell. He didn't shame. He just asked them to speak on record. That scared them more than protests. Truth, after all, doesn't blink. His logistics company hit new highs, with contracts pouring in from states where reform-minded mayors wanted to show support. But every dollar he earned was doubled back into community reinvestment, tech labs, therapy sessions for trauma victims, body cam analytics software developed by young black engineers, and a legal hotline for those facing retaliatory policing. One day, a man in a dark suit approached him after a panel discussion. Said he was from D.C. wanted Deshawn to consider running for office. Said the country needed voices like his. Deshawn smiled, shook his hand, and said, "You don't need me in a suit. You need me on the street. That's where the real politics happen." Word traveled. Influencers covered his journey. Magazines wrote think pieces titled "The Man Who Sued the System and Won," but he hated that title. He didn't win. He survived. And he knew too many who hadn't. Like Darnell from his old neighborhood, who was shot by an officer over a busted taillight. Or Keisha, whose son was tackled at a gas station for fitting a vague description. Or Javier, a former Marine who was handcuffed outside his own home. Deshawn kept photos of them on his office wall. Not to mourn. To remember. Every time the world praised him, he looked at those pictures and reminded himself, "This ain't about me." His podcast episodes began including family members of the deceased, officers turned whistleblowers, and youth activists. One episode featured a former officer who admitted he once keyed a car out of spite. "It was petty, it was wrong, and I was bitter," the man confessed. "We hated seeing people win. Especially black men with confidence. We were trained to see confidence as aggression." That episode changed lives. High schools began requesting it as curriculum. Some police academies too. Quietly, but consistently. A retired chief emailed Deshawn, "I don't agree with everything you say, but I can't deny you're telling the truth. We need more of that. Even when it stings." Not everyone felt the same. One night, while driving home from a podcast taping, Deshawn noticed a black sedan tailing him. He switched lanes 3 times. It followed. He pulled into a well-lit gas station. The sedan drove off. The next morning, his tires were slashed. No cameras caught it. Just shadows and suspicion. He posted it on Instagram with a caption, "Intimidation don't stop movement. It fuels it." The post went viral. Again. Celebrities shared it. Athletes messaged support. But his favorite comment came from a janitor named Leroy who wrote, "You speak for us. Keep stepping." And he did. He partnered with civil engineers to retrofit old buildings into community hubs, combining libraries, co-working spaces, and free legal clinics under one roof. Called them justice joints. The first one opened in Atlanta's West End. The grand opening felt like a festival, Food trucks, spoken word poets, street dancers, and elders clapping from lawn chairs. Deshawn stood at the center, overwhelmed. Not by ego. By the realization that one broken Jeep, one moment of truth, sparked a fire they couldn't smother. He gave a short speech. No mic. Just voice. They thought silence would keep us small. But we've been loud. Loud in our actions. Loud in our resilience. Loud in our love. This ain't the end. This is just one of many new beginnings. The crowd roared. Cameras flashed. Somewhere in the back, a boy named Malik held up a handmade sign, "I wanna be a boss too." Deshawn noticed. Walked over. Gave him a pair of his branded work gloves. "Start building now," he whispered. "Start with truth." That night, he drove home slowly. Windows down. No music. Just wind. He passed the alley where the vandalism first happened. Stopped. Parked. Got out. Walked the same steps. Closed his eyes. And breathed. Not fear. Not grief. Just presence. He was still here. Still whole. Still fighting. And the world, as broken as it was, felt just a little more honest. As weeks turned into months, Deshawn's name became more than a symbol of resistance. It became a blueprint. Across cities and states, communities began adopting his model: localized accountability hubs, youth-led media collectives, and civilian oversight boards backed not just by policy but by documentation and people power. A high school in Baltimore started a program called Truth Trackers, inspired by his nonprofit. In Oakland, an artist collective painted a mural of Deshawn's Jeep, scratches and all, under the words "Document. Defend. Deliver." But the weight of being a symbol bore its own cost. Deshawn rarely slept through the night anymore. He double-checked locks, kept backup hard drives in safe deposit boxes, encrypted every file, every message. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. Whispers circulated online, forums where anonymous users called him a fraud, a threat to law enforcement, a race baiter. His business email was hacked once, leaking sensitive client data. The FBI got involved, but no arrests were made. When his niece received a death threat at school, that was the final straw. He moved his family to a private address. Hired security. Upgraded every camera. But he kept showing up. At rallies. At hearings. At late-night Zoom calls with struggling youth who needed to see that someone like them could not only survive the system, but thrive in spite of it. One evening, after a speech at a local college, a young man named Jalen approached. Tall, soft-spoken, eyes that carried weight beyond his years. "I used to be a cop," he said. "Didn't last. I couldn't keep looking the other way." Deshawn nodded. "What do you do now?" Jalen hesitated. "I code. Been working on software that analyzes traffic stop data for bias." "Send it to me," Deshawn said. 2 months later, that code became the backbone of a new initiative, Bias Map, an open-source project that lets civilians upload and track data from local stops. Patterns emerged. Some neighborhoods were stopped 6 times more often than others. Some officers were repeat offenders. The data didn't lie. And when city officials saw the public dashboard, they panicked. Lawsuits followed. Policy changed. The officers who vandalized Deshawn's Jeep had long been fired, their names buried under bureaucracy. But now their actions were being used as training case studies, cautionary tales in ethics courses. One of them, Officer Brinks, even wrote an anonymous op-ed years later titled "How Power Blinded Me," admitting the jealousy, the racial bias, the thrill of unchecked authority. He never contacted Deshawn directly. He didn't need to. The truth had already reached him. Meanwhile, Deshawn's logistics empire stretched into 5 states. He started hiring formerly incarcerated men, offering them training, dignity, and a second chance. "Ain't no throwaways here," he said. "We're all part of the rebuild." When a white officer named Daniels showed up to apply, people were confused. But Deshawn listened. Daniels had been forced out after reporting corruption inside his precinct. "They called me a traitor," he said. "Said I broke the blue wall." "Good," Deshawn said. "Walls weren't meant to stand forever." Daniels became head of security for Frame the Truth, implementing protocols that protected every journalist in training under the nonprofit. His presence sent a message: accountability wasn't anti-cop. It was pro-human. But not everyone got that. One afternoon, while filming a segment near courthouse, Deshawn was surrounded by 6 plainclothes officers. They claimed he matched a description. Said they needed to detain him. His team live-streamed the encounter. Millions watched as Deshawn calmly handed over ID, recited statutes, asked for badge numbers. The officers backed off once the crowd formed. It was supposed to be routine. But there's nothing routine about being targeted in the shadow of your own progress. That night, Deshawn sat alone in his office, rewatching the footage. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He just stared. Not because he was shocked, but because even now, after everything, it was still happening. And it reminded him why the fight couldn't stop. Why silence was betrayal. Why every camera mattered. Across the city, muralists painted the moment. A new caption: "Still they try." But the story didn't end in protest. It never had. It moved into policy, into plans, into permanence. Deshawn partnered with urban planners to reimagine how neighborhoods functioned. Mixed-use spaces, transit upgrades, community patrols made up of trained volunteers instead of officers with guns. Pilot programs rolled out in Atlanta and Charlotte. Crime didn't spike. It dropped. Public trust rose. A school in Detroit began teaching civic technology, using his podcast as part of the curriculum. One 16-year-old girl emailed him, "I didn't think I mattered until I heard your voice. Now I want to be a civic architect." He printed that email. Framed it next to the Jeep photo. One morning, while walking to a meeting, he passed by a police recruitment billboard. It read, "We serve with honor." Someone had scribbled under it, "Do you?" Deshawn chuckled. Not because he agreed or disagreed, but because even now, the city was still in conversation with itself. And that was progress. A new mayoral administration reached out, asking him to serve on a civilian advisory board. He declined the title, but offered input. Don't just audit the police. Audit the power. Start with zoning boards. Start with housing. Start where oppression is invisible. They listened. For once. Funds were reallocated. Oversight increased. Cameras became standard in courtrooms, in precincts, even inside police training simulators. Deshawn helped design scenarios that taught empathy, de-escalation, and the consequences of unchecked authority. Some cadets scoffed. Others broke down. But the seeds were planted. At the 5-year anniversary of the Jeep incident, a massive rally was held downtown. 20,000 people marched, not just in protest, but in celebration of how one act of vandalism unraveled years of silence. Deshawn didn't speak on stage. He stood in the back. Watched children wave signs that read "Film the Future" and "Boss Up with Truth." A teacher approached him. "My students think of you like they used to think of athletes. You gave them a different kind of dream." That night, Deshawn sat in the Jeep. The scratches had faded, but he never fixed them. They were battle scars. Sacred. He pulled out a notebook and started writing. Not a podcast script. Not a business plan. But a book. Not about him. About the people. The moments. The faces. The ones who showed up. The ones who didn't. The ones who taught him that justice isn't a verdict, it's a verb. He titled it, "The Scratch That Spoke." It wasn't a memoir. It was a mirror. And he ended the first chapter with a simple line: "They tried to silence me. Instead, they made me louder." The book took 6 months to finish. Every morning before sunrise, Deshawn would sit at the same kitchen table where he once watched the footage of his Jeep getting vandalized and write until his hands cramped. He didn't hire a ghostwriter. He didn't glamorize the events. He didn't edit out the moments where he doubted, cried, failed, or froze. He included the texts he never answered, the apologies he never received, the people he couldn't save. When the manuscript was done, he didn't pitch it to a big publisher. He self-published and distributed it for free through his non-profit's website. Within a week, over 100,000 downloads. Within a month, schools, prisons, police academies, and churches were requesting bulk print orders. A state senator read it on a flight, called it required reading for every public servant, and sponsored a bill nicknamed the Deshawn Act, a police accountability measure mandating independent civilian oversight boards in every major city in the state. The bill passed with bipartisan support, and that's when Deshawn realized the vandalism of his Jeep wasn't the worst thing that happened to him. It was the moment that made everything else possible. He didn't forgive the officers who did it. Forgiveness wasn't owed. But he reclaimed the narrative they tried to write for him. Years later, on the 10th anniversary of the incident, Deshawn returned to the same parking lot. The building had been torn down, replaced by a cultural center named after an activist who was killed by police in another state. A street artist had painted a new mural there. It showed Deshawn standing in front of the scratched-up Jeep, flanked by kids with cameras, parents with court documents, and elders holding candles. At the bottom, in bold red, it said, "Truth always leaves a mark." He stood in silence, hand on the hood of a new generation story. And then a young boy walked up to him, maybe 9 or 10, hoodie too big, shoes untied. "Are you the Jeep guy?" the boy asked. Deshawn smiled. "I guess I am." "My school made us watch your video," the boy said. "They said you fought the police." Deshawn knelt beside him. "I didn't fight the police. I fought for the truth. Big difference." "You think I could do that too?" "You already are. You asked a question. That's where it starts." The boy nodded and ran back to his mom. Deshawn watched them disappear into the crowd. That moment stuck with him more than any award, any article, any interview. Because the truth wasn't just being told, it was being inherited. The podcast hit 100 million downloads, and a national TV network offered Deshawn a show. He turned it down. Said the story belonged to the people, not a production company. Instead, he expanded the podcast into a storytelling platform, giving young creators from marginalized communities their own shows, their own segments, their own audiences. Within 2 years, Frame the Truth Studios produced over 30 original series, all centered around justice, accountability, and lived experience. It wasn't entertainment. It was empowerment. Some nights he still drove the Jeep. People recognized it. Took pictures. Asked questions. He never changed the plates. Never fixed the scratches. It was a time capsule. A reminder. A relic of resistance. He once drove it back to his childhood neighborhood. Parked on the same block where he used to sell water bottles in the summer and dodge sirens at night. Old neighbors came out. They hugged him. Told him they saw him on TV. Told him he made them proud. One of the older guys, Leon, said, "We thought you were crazy for posting that video. But you weren't crazy. You were just early." Deshawn laughed. Better early than never. On the drive back, he saw a mural of Malcolm Martin, and a new face, his. But his part of the mural showed him holding a phone up, screen glowing, camera lens red. Not speaking. Just watching. Bearing witness. That's what changed things. Not the noise, but the evidence. Not the anger, but the clarity. That image ended up on t-shirts, protest signs, school hallway banners. Kids wore it like armor. Like memory. Like mission. Eventually, an independent film studio adapted his story into a documentary. Deshawn didn't appear on camera much. He insisted it center the community. The project won awards, but more importantly, it opened doors. It made people uncomfortable in the right ways. One scene showed the original body cam footage from the officers who vandalized the Jeep, public records finally released after years of pressure. The audio was clear. The slurs. The laughter. The malice. But also the fear. "He thinks he's untouchable," one officer muttered. "He got cameras everywhere." Another voice answered, "Let's see how he feels without wheels." That was the line that stuck. That was the line that exposed it all, not just the act, but the motive. Power doesn't like being recorded. The film ended with footage of kids at a community media camp learning how to use editing software. One girl, maybe 11, turned to the camera and said, "I'm gonna tell the truth louder than they lie." Deshawn watched the premiere from the back row, eyes wet, heart full. He didn't stay for the applause. Slipped out the side door and walked into the night. He wasn't interested in fame. He was interested in footprints. The kind that lead others to freedom. Over time, other voices rose. Stronger. Sharper. Younger. He stepped back. Not in retreat, but in faith. The work didn't need a single face anymore. It had become a chorus. And when the National Museum of Civil Rights called to ask if they could display the Jeep, Deshawn agreed, but only if it stayed scratched. People need to see the marks, he said. That's where the story lives. Today, it sits behind glass, untouched, unrestored. A timeline wrapped around it, showing the ripple effects, new laws, new leaders, new lives saved. Tour guides tell visitors, this Jeep wasn't famous because of who drove it. It was famous because of what it survived. And somewhere in a small town, a boy walks past that exhibit, eyes wide, heart stirred, wondering if one day he too might leave a mark not by fighting, but by filming. Not by shouting, but by showing. Not by burning down, but by building up. Because the camera didn't just catch cops in the act. It caught a system off guard. And Deshawn? He didn't just catch them vandalizing his Jeep. He caught the moment when silence stopped working. The moment when evidence overruled excuses. The moment when a man became a movement. And he proved without raising a fist, without firing a shot, that the truth, not the law, not the badge, not the system, but the truth would always be stronger than fear. Always.